Well, welcome, Jay. It's good to reconnect here.
Oh, it's good to connect again. Yes,
Yeah,
I'm glad to
totally.
be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are pastoring a gathering called Revolution that's been kind of all over. Kind of curious if you just maybe introduce yourself and a little bit about your background and what's Revolution and what are y'all up to?
Uh, yeah, I'm Jay Baker. I've been doing Revolution for 30 years. We started in Arizona, around the Phoenix area, and moved all over the place. Was in Atlanta for quite a bit of time. Was in LA for a little bit of time.
Yep.
New York, in Brooklyn for about 7 years. Minnesota for, oh gosh, probably 5 or 6 years. And now I've been here in Seattle, Washington for 5 years. Revolution really started out because we felt like there were all these kids, because I was a kid, I was 18, that were just falling through the cracks, and we just kind of wanted to make a place where they felt comfortable and weren't, didn't, maybe we caught them on their way out. And then eventually it kind of just became something completely different, of a place for people to come and just be who they are. It's hard to
Hmm.
kind of wrap all that up, but I grew up with my parents were televangelists, very big in the 80s, had a scandal, all that stuff. I've seen the dark side of Christianity. I've seen the good sides of it, and wherever we are now, which seems like a very even more darker, stranger place than I think the church has ever been before. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's my journey. Now, Revolution, for the first time here, because we moved here during COVID, we've been an online community. That's why we kind of went from church to gathering, and also kind of, the church word is loaded sometimes, but the
Yeah.
gathering kind of
Yeah.
felt more of a thing, as we gather on Sundays and, have conversation and do a lot of work through social media. And so it's a new world. It's definitely different. It's the first time I haven't had a community like of in-person community,
Yeah.
and but it so far so good. So giving me
Oh,
time
that's
to raise
awesome.
my kids a bit.
Yeah. Right. That's what a novel concept to be able to
I know my kids come
invest in
first, and it's
people.
so wild
Yeah.
that sometimes people are like, "What? Why can't your kids?" And I'm like, "Nope, kids come
Yep.
first."
Not doing that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Love that. Love that for them and for you.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's so cool. So yeah, you've had quite the journey through kind of church world and stuff, but I think that I had reached out to you initially. I think I connected you and I connected for the first time way back like in the 2010s on the website formerly known as Twitter,
Yeah,
which used to be, kind of a generative space, which is hard to imagine now, but
yeah, it is real. I haven't. I quit.
yeah.
I was surprised, but I just was like, I can't do it anymore, and it just wasn't working for Revolution. It wasn't working for me anymore. I was like,
No.
so now,
Yeah.
but I'm on all the other ones. I just couldn't stay on there.
Yep, that's I hear you. I'm kind of the same. I think there's an account, but it's not updated for sure.
Did we? So we met on Twitter.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then for
Were
a
we
while we've been
arguing or were we
talking.
okay?
Oh no, we were good. Yeah, I
Okay,
think
that's
we were
good.
like thinking similarly. I think
Nice,
about some
nice,
stuff.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. It turns out, I mean, like I think the first time we chatted was um, around theology, but then also politics and like, wait, what's happening in sort of the religious and political landscape,
Yeah,
all the ways that Christianity and the kind of a certain brand of the right wing of American politics were getting in bed with each other
yeah,
was like profoundly uncomfortable, but also nothing new,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, so I mean, right now we've just at Fabric. So Fabric is in South Minneapolis. Our office right now we're like five blocks away from where Revolution gathered when you were in Minneapolis.
yeah.
So
Bryant Lake Bowl,
love
we
it.
loved
Bryant
it
Lake
there.
Bowl. Yeah, that was a cool spot.
They were so good to us. They were. I mean, when we hit tough times, they lowered our rent. I mean, they really just,
Wow.
they would set up times for us to like have bowling afterwards with folks, and it was really cool. No, I really loved
Yeah.
it there.
It was a good space too. I remember so I grew up a Lutheran, like ELCA Lutheran, and
Yeah,
I was in seminary. And my wife and I, Rachel and I, came to Bryant Lake Bowl, and man, you just came out with like a Bible, a poem, sat at a table and just talked with us. I was like, this is a cool way to
Yeah, I
experience a
that's
community.
the only way I know how to. I mean, it's and I've been doing that for years. I mean, we never really took off in Minnesota, but like other places, that's always been the thing. Is just kind of no music, no anything, just a table and me or whoever we would have come in and speak. And yeah, I think I was bruised enough from growing up in the church, and there's just certain things where I still don't feel comfortable walking into a church like
Yeah.
setting. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm not the only one who feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me also, I kind of see it as, not just a calling, but a type of art, and a type of
Mm-hmm.
philosophy. So it's all just, when you bring all that together, you just kind of have to be true to what you're trying to do, and hope other people react to that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and like just, talk to people like people, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's kind of what an incredibly simple thing to do.
I mean, it seems like a lost art, especially in the Christian world. It seems like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have a line between, like, I don't walk out or check out, or, you know what I mean? I'm like, kunk, pastor card done.
Yeah.
It's a part of my life. And I
Yeah.
think the problem is we so often kind of create it into these like sections,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
or that Christianity becomes this weird thing that dominates you. So you speak that way and talk that way, and then you end up becoming something else. And that's just never.
Yeah.
I try to live life on life's terms. I learned that in the 12-step program
Ooh, I
early
love
on in
that.
my life, and live in reality.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Like that's and ultimately I think when Fabric started, we started in 2006 as Jacob's Well, it was called. Now it's changed to Fabric.
Okay.
But back then it was, there's like kind of the emerging church movement going on and whatever. And I think one of the things that I can't speak on behalf of my predecessor Greg here, who started this church, but when I came to Revolution, and then have learned more about Fabric as I've gotten more and more involved as a pastor here. Kind of one of the things that draws me to it is like in seminary and growing up in the mainline church, it's like, hey, man, it's all about like the right time to stand up and sit down and do prayers in the right language, and it can be so performative,
Right.
and really the only thing that's ever going to draw me into a community or make me make the courageous decision to like walk through the door or log on or have a conversation is like the curiosity. There's got to be something more than what is,
Yeah.
because what is broadly around us right now ain't it. It can't be, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I really have a deep appreciation for the way that you've approached like both
Thanks,
engagement
man.
online, but also as a pastor. Like it's really cool. So yeah,
Thank you.
we've been in a absolutely we've been in a conversation just wrapped up actually called Jesus Untamed, and it really emerged out of basically looking around in the community that we're in and the
Yeah.
country we're in and the church and the whole landscape, and going, you know, the Christians, the noisiest Christians right now, are speaking in a way that I don't get. Like, it seems to me that Jesus is at the heart of this religious movement. But if Jesus is at the heart of this religious movement, and we know how he spoke and what he taught and how he lived from at least the Bible, if we're going to give that any sort of power or
Yeah.
authority or whatever,
Credence.
what they're doing and what they're saying sounds very little like Jesus. So
Yeah.
let's maybe take a moment to at least get introduced or reintroduced to the Jesus of the Bible, and kind of wonder at like how did Jesus get so tame, and how did Jesus become such a mascot for power when Jesus wasn't that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's not Jesus. That's the thing is I have conversations with a lot of folks, especially on Facebook, which is like, can be a dumpster dive sometime.
Right.
But also with the history of my family, sometimes I'll get these like, I don't think of them as old people anymore the older I get.
Yeah, right.
Getting closer to their age.
We're not young anymore.
No, some of them are in their 60s and 70s and things like that, though. And my dad's 85, but like, a lot of these folks will try to argue with me, and I'll bring up Jesus, and this is more evangelical. This is probably a little outside of your ELCA wheelhouse, but
Mm-hmm.
these folks will all of a sudden just rebuke you in the name of Jesus for
Oh, yeah.
quoting Jesus because it doesn't fit with the worldview that they've been taught and the culture that they've been taught in their communities, and for some of them for their whole lives. I mean, when my dad in the 80s was approached by Jerry Falwell, asked to join the Christian Coalition, and my dad didn't do it, which was pretty cool. He's pretty conservative now, but he wasn't back then. And so this has been something that's been happening for a long time. And these and if it's not, the problem with the churches is often either based around like legalism, which is something I dealt with a lot in my teenage years with just being like going to other churches because my dad was in prison and my mom was trying to raise me and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the church really embraced politics, but conservative politics. And I don't know, it seems like the church is always trying to make itself something that it's not. And so it does seem very, I mean, it worries me. Like when I see like books like coming out, like, the empathy, toxic empathy and things like that. I mean, I'm just like,
yeah,
that to me is like completely anti-Christ, and I have a lot of conversations with people, some of the conservative folks as well, and it's real wild to see that it's, I remember growing up, there was this song, this punk rock Christian band, and they had some song called, I can't remember what band it was, but it was called Sunday Christian or something like that. And a Sunday Christian Sunday Christian used to mean like, oh, I went out to the bar and partied on the weekends, and then I come to church and act like everything's good, and for me, it's like now it's, and people, we have to die to your flesh, all this stuff. But to me now it's become like this real like political thing where it's like they have to justify by saying, well, empathy is sinful, and so that justifies them to be crueler. Or I saw this guy the other day who was just really out there, pastor who has 28,000 followers, on Instagram, saying, the Pope was saying, if you're pro-life, you can't be pro-death penalty. You can't, and the guy was like, I feel my Reformation blood boiling, like all of a sudden Reformation gave us, allowed us to be a contradiction, So it's really tough to see these folks justify discrimination and justify hate and justify murder and justify cruelty to human beings in such a and try to do this biblically and try to do it with Jesus. I mean, I saw somebody posted a thing saying like, well, Jesus didn't heal everybody and we have to learn to live with it. Like, they just want to be like, well, Jesus didn't heal every single person. So that gives us the reason not to be good to some people.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty scary time. I mean, I was explaining to somebody the other day, I'm like, trying to defend the church is like trying like almost like you're a member of the circus.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get the people to take the circus seriously. You might be a knife thrower, but people are still hoping you misthrow that knife. You know what I mean? It's like, it's hard to feel like, I don't even like the word pastor anymore and things like that, because it just doesn't feel comfortable to me. Like, I just like want to live my life.
Yeah.
I want to follow Jesus, and that following has led me to, understanding other people, like reading Paul Tillich, who was a Lutheran.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest philosophers and theologians of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And reading like Martin Luther King and reading philosophy and looking at things differently. And then that leads me back. It's kind of like this, this kind of revolution, if you will.
Hey, I see what you did there.
And so, yeah, it's real tough to, It's very discouraging. It's because one of the things I try not to do is scapegoat. And I felt like, especially a few years ago, a lot of my left leaning brothers and sisters were kind of scapegoating the right. Like deconstruction became like, well, that's just a way for us to say all these conservatives are horrible and they're bad. And I didn't like that either, because it reminded me of the scapegoating of the conservative church in the 80s. And I'm like, well, are we switching places? Are we going to like just continue to this infighting? Because I'm always wanting to bring people together. And one of the things we talk about is arguing well at Revolution, or disagreeing well.
Yeah.
And not just having diversity of identity or diversity of skin tone or diversity, but diversity of thought. Like we come together and we can sit together and we can disagree and work these things out. And that doesn't really make you very popular. That really doesn't win you a lot of friends and things. But I feel like that's what Jesus did when, you see him sitting at Matthew's house, when you see him calling Matthew in the midst of tax collecting. And he's got zealots that are with him who probably thought, well, Matthew's a traitor. We should probably kill him. That kind of thing of the people that Jesus kind of, he has to go through Samaria, because the woman at the well, who's an outcast, he has to use her to be the first missionary of the church ever.
Right.
So for me, those things are pretty important. And I'm very Paulinian as well, but only like proper Paulinian. So only about, 8 of his books that I subscribe to.
The verifiable Paul.
Yeah, because it seems like, things like the pastoral epistles are trying to undo his work and trying to undo community. And I think that's where we could maybe look theologically, where some of these people are getting away from Jesus, is they just don't know their Bible. They don't know what's a forgery. They don't know what's, written in someone's name. They don't understand the scholarship of the Bible. They don't understand the history of the Bible. And so, if you want to find, I told somebody the other day, it's like, sometimes people make the Bible like choose your own adventure.
Yeah, totally.
But like I would argue with some people who are like, well, it says this and this in 1 Timothy, and I'm going, no, that's exactly the thing that Paul was preaching against. You've got to look at the book of Galatians. Paul's got these two divided groups. He's got Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians, and they're totally divided, and they're basically trying to destroy each other. And he's trying to bring them together, call them together, restoration, practice, patience with one another, knowing what's, there's going to be things that you disagree on, but those things aren't important. So just agree to disagree and make room for each other. And if you fail, restore each other. So that, so I don't like, it's real easy. It would be real easy for me to be like, well, these people are just completely lost, but it's just, they're in a tradition where they're made to believe that the Bible is something that it's not, that it's like this one holy book, and that it and like you can, and I've done this most of my life, is where, this says this and over here. And so it says over here, but those writers didn't know about the other writers. I mean, gospel writers probably knew Paul. Some of the gospel writers probably knew of Paul's writings because they were like 20, 30 years older.
Yeah.
So you've got to, that's the frustrating part, is you're kind of going like, well, I'm grateful for people like Dan McClellan, who's out there now.
Yeah. I've seen him on like TikTok.
And so he's making scholarship a little bit more approachable. I mean, we did 16 weeks in Galatians, just going through the scholarship of Galatians.
Wow.
So, and the reason I find that important is because I think Paul gets the message of Jesus and is preaching that message of, faith expressing itself in love. The most important thing is faith, and Jesus saying loving God with all your heart equally as important, loving your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
So when you're able to really dive into those things, you're able to see that. But
that scapegoating is real, man. That it's such a temptation. Like I feel like, I think it was the first week of the series that we did, we were talking about how Jesus was actively disrupting like the sort of forces of separation that keep people, like keep neighbors, keep actual people at each other's throats, looking at each other, rather than looking at the ways that power is at work in the world, trying to make sure that we're fighting each other instead of, actively working together to like make material something of God's vision for us, right?
Yeah.
And so then, and when Jesus says stuff like, he's asked, what are the two most, or what's the most important command? He said, well, love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, your whole body, your whole mind. And the second is equally as important, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. And I feel like the
It's cool that he adds
how
that
do we,
second one because wasn't
yeah.
asked about the second one.
Yeah, exactly. And he doesn't tell us how to do it, right? Like
Yeah.
that's our work to figure out. But I mean, you've already alluded to around revolution that it's like we have to learn to disagree well, to argue well, to be in community even across difference, not kind of create separate tribes. And I'm curious, like, how across your life, your work, how have you seen that done well?
I've done it poorly before, so
Yeah,
that
me
helped.
too. I'm with
Yeah.
you there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've failed at it and sometimes still do. Right now what's tough is because you see a lot of people on the right scapegoating. So you have to be able to, so you're like, okay, if I call out their scapegoating, am I scapegoating?
Oh no, I'm in
Yeah.
it. I'm in the mind trap. Yeah.
Yeah, so that gets weird, but I've decided that I need to be clear about things and be honest, straightforward with people the best I can. And if it comes out that I messed up, I will quickly admit it. I mean, I've just over the years, for me, it's like 10 months ago, I had a lot of my Democrat brothers and sisters at my church, a lot of my Democrat friends leave Revolution because I was upset with the bombing that was happening in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
And I just could not get by Vice President Harris. It was really in the way for
Yeah.
me. And I felt like this is my conviction. And they were upset. And now I'm talking about, everything that's going on today with Donald Trump and all this stuff, and so I'm an equal opportunist. Its problem is the people have very short-term memory
Yeah, that's right.
of that. So they think, oh, you're just you liberals, all you want is, and I'm going like, listen, I mean, I am a leftist, but I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, and I'm having to
Yeah.
explain this to them. And it's really tough when people don't interact with your work. And so you're always having to kind of assume that people don't know where you're coming from.
Mm.
And that helps a little bit. And I think in my mistakes in the past, I always assumed that people kind of got where I was coming from. It's just so easy to cut people off at the knees. It's so easy to be judgmental. And so I really do practice grace as much as I can. Grace, always say grace is anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is
Oh, I
like no
like that.
system gets the corner on it. There's no asterisk symbol next to it, and
Yeah.
everybody wants to say, well, grace is okay. But,
Yeah.
we always are trying to make it like semi-amazing grace. And that's not the way it is. And, Dr. King really showed that because he always talked about how people weren't the enemies, but the enemy was misinformation.
Yeah.
And when you see someone like King say that, you go, okay,
Mm-hmm.
he was really in the middle of it. He if anybody could have jumped to identity politics at that time, completely, and said, well, these people are just, white people are awful, or these, but he really tried to be clear with who, I mean, he was like, well, listen, the moderates are doing us wrong because they're just saying, wait, so he would make it very clear. And I think that's what we have to do is we have to be intentional. We have to be clear with folks. And I do think of like Corinthians 13, 4-7, love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful and endures through every circumstance. I know we're supposed to talk about Jesus right now, but I think that all has to do with Jesus's influence on the life of the Apostle Paul, obviously. Yeah. And, that's, and there are times, where Jesus would answer people or give a question to people or do things like that and rebuke folks. But again, it's knowing the timing, but right now it seems like we're in such a horrible place. I mean,
Yeah.
It's just seeing how our immigrant brothers and sisters are being treated and then seeing Christians support that, is wild to me. But seeing Christians support like one group in between Israel and Hamas and picking one group and saying, well, these people just, should be bombed and these people shouldn't be bombed. To me, it's like, no, nobody should be bombed. This is,
Right.
we want peace. This is what we're called to. And these folks have a right to live because, well, if you knew what those people were really like, I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying these people have the right to be alive and live
Yeah.
because they're worthy of life, And so that is, it's really tough. It's, because I feel like I can't find a tribe, to be honest with you. And maybe that's good because community often needs an outsider to be a community. And
Ooh.
so it's harder for me to have, and that comes from that's studying from philosophy. Philosophy, community often has the outsider, and you might not think you do, but if you start thinking about it, go like, oh,
It's pretty
there
much
they
every
are.
community I've been a part of. There's something of that.
Yeah. So, but to really live in life, to live in public, to like when you're on the bus or something, when you're on a bus or in your park or in the park or something like that, you're in a public area. All of a sudden everything's equal, you're just with people. And learning to live that way in life every day is, certainly for me is part of it, But I'm worried about the people's losing their SNAP benefits in a couple weeks. I was on SNAP this summer to help with my kids. I work sometimes 3 or 4 jobs just to do this, So I don't know. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
I mean, when I think there are certain things that when Jesus talks about, like, welcome the immigrant, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, liberate the captives. I mean, all that kind of stuff. I think he was maybe serious.
Yeah, yeah. And what's wild is I have people who will say to me, well, Jesus didn't talk about getting involved with the government, or something like that. And I'm like, well, first of all, he was killed by the Romans.
That's right. Yeah, let's
And
actually be real here.
and the Rome was an occupier at the time. So yeah, Jesus wasn't going to Rome and saying, hey, can we set up a food program? Because he was talking to the church because they were in occupied territory. And really those people were allowed to live so they could have people to rule over. I mean, you don't want to come into a territory and just get rid of everybody unless you have another group you want to. But so, it's like,
yeah, exactly.
So people also don't understand their history and how that works. And that, again, comes back to like everybody putting so much investment into the Bible and not knowing it. And I do believe like we're called to the least of it. We're called to love our people say, well, what about those people who came legally? And I'm like, what about them? I'm like, I'm grateful that they did. And they did that. And I know how hard that is. But now folks don't even have a chance.
Yeah.
And so we've got to speak up for these folks. We've got to speak up for the least of these. We've got to speak up for the poor. I mean, these were the basic messages of the gospel. And here we have some of the loudest Christians finding ways to compromise that message, and they don't want anything to do with Jesus anymore. And that's really wild to me. And they don't really, if they knew the Apostle Paul within his actual written context, they probably wouldn't want much to do with him anymore either.
Yeah.
But because it's so bedded into their lives and their society and how they grew up and how they were raised, and there's just a ton of bad theology out there. And they've got us divided, us against them. I mean, we're rarely having conversations about billionaires and tax cuts unless you're listening to like a liberal radio station or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we've just forgotten the very people Jesus has called us to. And to love our enemies as ourselves as well. And we forget the story of the Good Samaritan and things like that. Like, it's like, this is really tough work. Yeah. If you really want to follow Jesus, you're in a time in our history where it's going to be really complicated and it's going to be exhausting.
Yeah. And even just looking in the mirror might get hard, right? Like taking an honest assessment of the ways that like I'm participating in it too. I'm not comfortable with that. So what, right? So what do I do about that?
Yeah. I mean, do I throw my phone out? Do I quit all the Instagrams and all the Facebooks and all that stuff? Cause these guys are part of the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just feel like the more the more I learn about and reread and revisit the teachings of Jesus, the more I'm confronted with that reality that, like, it's what he was doing, what the vision that he was casting, what he was inviting people into. Maybe it should be for everybody, but
Yeah.
it's not for everybody, you know? Like, there's too many people who prioritize things like power, influence, wealth, comfort, you know, all that kind of stuff to really be able to actively participate, I think, in what Jesus was talking about.
And sometimes it's almost like they want their cake and eat it too, and that some maybe even well-meaning teacher, has feels the same way. So they go in and they hear what they want to hear. And then they hear people like you and me and think, oh, those guys are gone off the rails. What's wrong with these guys? They're hippies or they're whatever, and are woke or this and that, and I'm like, this isn't about any wokeness or conservative. This is literally like, love your neighbor as yourself. Love the least of these. I mean, it's just like, it's constantly, Jesus is constantly reminding us that the other is worth love. Matter of fact, I was listening to this atheist guy historian talk about, a biblical scholar as well. And he was talking about, he was asked, was there anything that Jesus really added to the world, like to history, through his moral teachings? Because a lot of the moral teachings that Jesus was doing at the time, you could have heard from Greek philosophers, would have been saying very similar things.
Yeah.
And he said, the one thing that sticks out in Jesus's teaching and that has impacted history is loving the other. Loving those outside of your tribe. The story of the Samaritan, it's not even called the Good Samaritan. It's not like Jesus said, there was a good one. We found a good one.
It was a generic Samaritan.
It was just a Samaritan. But the whole point, and then loving your enemy as self and loving neighbor as yourself, and find out your neighbor is that who's acting is a Samaritan and who really showed love. And that was the most radical thing. And he was saying like stuff like when the professor was saying stuff like, so when I see things like, Live Aid or a concert for Bangladesh, he's like, that is the legacy of Jesus.
Yeah.
Before then, people weren't thinking about the town over. They weren't even thinking usually about people outside of their own culture or their, in their own communities, barely. Yeah. And so Jesus, if you will, flips the table. But he really does with the idea of the other, to love the other, and that the other becomes valuable and important. So this is what Jesus' legacy is. Not raising from the dead, not raising people from the dead, not healing the blind, none of that. We don't see any of that really today. But Jesus' legacy, and I just did a talk on this, matter of fact, my last talk was about this. It was loving the other. And so when we cease to love the other, I think of like when James said, faith without works is dead. And I used to hate that verse because I was also kind of a Lutheran person. And Luther didn't like that. But when you read on, I'm convinced that,
keep going, right?
Yeah, I'm convinced that James is a socialist now after my last deep dive. I did a context. Awesome. I did James in context, and I'll tell you why. Well, because he continues to talk about, not showing preferential treatment to wealthy people or wealthy congregants or anything like that. But he also says faith without works is dead. If you walk past someone in need who is hungry and cold, and you go, oh, eat well, stay warm, see you later. And he goes, that's when your faith is dead. And for me, as a grace guy, I've always felt like that dead faith wasn't meaning like that guy's going to hell. I would just think like that guy's faith is dead to all other humans outside of themselves. Yeah. Like it is a dead faith. It just doesn't reproduce anything. It's not showing fruit or things like that. Yes. I mean, that's the other thing, the fruits of the Spirit. Some over the years, people think, well, look at the fruit of his ministry. People say things like that, and you think, oh, it's a big church, and he drives a Cadillac, and that's not fruit. Fruit is peace and patience and kindness and joy and those things. Right. So, you really have to realize is like when our faith is ceases to be worthy to anyone else outside of our bodies, and really then to us, I would say, it really is dead in a way, because I don't think about the afterlife too much. I think that's the issue, is that we're not loving the other. We're not doing, and so that's what should set us apart, is not that we're perfect people, not that we're even good people, but that the fact that we're able to love the least of these, we're able to love others, and we're able to help others do the same. And that's not what we're known for at all. We're known for scapegoating each other. We're known for arguing with one another. I'm a cool Christian, so you can listen to me, that kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with, reclaiming your Christianity. But then when that part of the Christianity says, well, now we're only for the left, we're only for the liberals, we're only for the people who include these people. And if you exclude these, then you're not going to be part of us. We cut down the conversation. We cut down the relationship. We would have never walked up to Matthew in the midst of tax collecting and saying, hey, do you need a job?
Right.
Come follow me. Come work with me.
I got a gig. I got a new gig for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all my guys are going to hate you. Come on, let's work together. Let's go to your house tonight. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Just don't sit next to the zealots because they might stab you during dinner. What happens? People see Jesus at this house and they're going like, what's going on? And you almost wonder, I used to always think, well, oh, these Pharisees who were saying this must have been real judgmental bastards. But maybe they were somebody who had followed Jesus long enough to know, like, he hangs out with zealots, he hangs out with he hangs out with, and now he's hanging out with tax collectors. And maybe at that point they were like, oh, so he can't be the guy. Why would he hang out with this scum? And Jesus comes and says, healthy people don't need sick people. I've come to call sinners, not those who think they're good enough.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it real clear of how we are called to work together. And I think even in Jesus's rebukes to people, restoration was always part of it. I mean, I think that's why the Apostle Paul says, because I'm sure he probably knew a lot more about Jesus than the Gospels that we have. He goes, if you think you're too good to restore someone, you're really only fooling yourself. And he goes, now be careful not to fall into the same sin. But now the sin of Galatia and Gauls was legalism. It's probably the easiest thing to fall into that, like Peter did early on in the book, when Peter goes like, I'm not going to sit with the Gentile Christians because I don't want James's guys to be upset with me. So that's what Paul's talking about. Don't fall into that because that's an easy thing. And I'm sure Paul knew that from experience. And so you get these, that's the beauty of Christianity. That's the beauty of following this faith, that really grace, the intense love of it. Like, why did Hegel, one of the greatest philosophers and one of the most confusing philosophers of our time, and well, not our lifetime, but hundreds of years, why was he drawn to Christianity? Is because he said it was that love, and that the love that Christ showed, the love that was there within Christ and within the Christianity as a whole, that really blew his mind. He said there's something different there. This idea of forgiveness and restoration. And we see it all through the Gospels. I'm trying to think, like, I was reading, we were doing this, I think it was Mark, we were talking about the context of Mark, and how it was originally just written by an unknown author, but how they had to get it out there because everybody was like, how is this guy a Messiah who died? Right. How is there someone who is a God who died? Like that, we need to get that out there. And why was he always wandering around to different places? That was another thing. Why was he always moving outside of areas that would have been considered like his people? Why was he moving?
Home base, right?
Yeah.
Going everywhere else.
So they kind of looked at him as like, why was he this kind of traveling Messiah who ends up dying? How can this be? Yeah. And that's why that first gospel has to get out there pretty fast. Not fast enough, like 10 or 20 years later, but still has to. Yeah. That book was probably pushed out there really fast in order for people to be like, who were saying that. I mean, one of the first, what is it? When someone spray paints something like a tag, not a tag, but
like the graffiti.
Graffiti. One of the first graffitis of time in Rome is a picture of a god being crucified, and it was a mocking, like, these people worship a crucified God. How crazy is that? Yep. So I know I'm in the weeds with this, but it's just when you go into these deep dives of context and things like that, the thing is, it only gets better. Like, my mother knew this. My mother's was known for her love for people and loving the gay community and loving people where they were at. And
so cool how she's so celebrated within the gay community.
Right. Well, and I mean,
that's so cool.
It's wild because, I always think about when Jesus said, I want to give you a new commandment. And it wasn't really that new because I
Yeah.
want you guys to
Feels
love each
recycled.
other, and how you love one another will prove to the world that you belong to me. Your love for one another will prove to and for me that I see that when my mom, when they make a film about my mom, or they made, a Broadway show about my mom, and they've made countless documentaries about her, that well done, mom. You did the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to say is all the time I spend in scholarship and reading theology and then reading philosophy and even psychology, when I come back and I dig deep, what I find is still that message of loving the other, loving your neighbor as yourself, being known for your love for one another. And that requires sacrifice and it requires us to speak out. It requires us to listen well,
Yeah.
you know, and I
That
think
is
right
that's
now we do, you
scandalous.
know.
Like that is absolutely scandalous.
It is. And what's really tough is this is the hardest part I deal with. Isn't necessarily loving my own enemies. It's loving other people's enemies,
Mm-hmm.
because you can
Mm.
quickly become their enemy soon. Because I've been an ally to LGBTQ folks and things like that. And then when they see me sitting down talking to someone who's not on their, sometimes like, what are you doing? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'm
Yeah.
hoping to see change here, because I believe that we can change. I hate the idea of cancel culture and things like that, because I don't think it's a biblical concept at all,
Yeah.
because it takes out hope, it takes out grace, it takes out restoration, and we're called to restore.
Yeah.
So when we see these people speaking evil or speaking antichrist message like empathy is toxic and things like that, usually our first thought is, how do I defeat this person? How do
Yeah.
I straighten this person out?
Yeah. My first thought is never the generous one.
No, yeah, I'm
Make
like, how
point
do
of
I
that. Yeah.
expose their lies?
Yeah.
And not to say that that's not vital, that needs, because especially if it's spreading, but it's also, how do I how do I convince them otherwise? And in this day and age, it's not easy to do, because we're not going to be having a lot, we're not in the same community. We might have a little bit of a trade-off online, but still the thought is like, how can we do this? Because if we want to really have a movement and a revolution, you do that with bringing people in, not by
Mm-hmm.
telling people it's too late. Like the guy who wrote "I Kissed Dating Goodbye," and then he came out and denounced it, and I saw these people being like, it's too late, you ruined my life, you ruined my
Yeah.
dating, and I'm going like, that's not grace, that's not
Right.
Jesus either. So it's not just like, hey, we love the people who are really suffering. It's also, yeah, we love the people who are kind of being bad too, because we would like to see them restored. We would like to see them led to repentance, which is just a change of mind, a change of heart, and change of that.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy answer. It's not just like, well, we just get rid of the Republicans and conservatives
Yeah.
and everything will be fine. It's
Everything's
like,
gonna be hunky dory.
yeah,
Yeah.
because we also have to look at ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to often look at
Yeah.
ourselves going like, well, why would I be okay with, like, well, as long as it's not, I don't like this guy, but I'll vote for this person, even though they're helping commit a genocide and putting billions of dollars in. We have to ask ourselves, like, okay, all of a sudden I'm not loving my neighbor as myself, or at least my neighbor is not outside of my border.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's when it comes really tough. Why did Jesus, most Jews would have walked around with the woman at the well, they would have walked around Samaria. And what does he do? He says, I have to go through, I have to talk to this
Yep.
person.
Go
So
in there.
it's not,
Yep.
we don't really get, to me, I don't feel like we get to live in a world with borders like that necessarily,
Yeah.
and that, when you try to love to that extent, it gets overwhelming.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I've heard it said in any number of ways. Like, change really happens at the speed of relationship, and I think too often, my response to that, I look at other, to your point about like my enemies becoming the enemies of people I love, right, or that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Like, I look at people with vastly different understandings of the world than I do, and I might not be the one impacted by that, but my assumption where I go is like, it's not my work to be in relationship so that change can happen. It's the two parties in conflict with one another.
Yeah.
That gives me such an easy out, because I can just be a spectator to everything,
Yeah.
not actually have my skin in the game, right? Like, I don't need to be 10 toes down anywhere if I just kind of stay out of it, right? And I think that way too often right now, like, people are just like, I'm just gonna not pay attention. I'm gonna bury my head in the sand. I'm gonna, whatever my fear response is, I'm gonna stay out of it and not get involved. And that's a challenge too, I think, in all this.
It is. Well, too, you also have to make sure you're taking care of yourself and I think there's some people who need it. I mean, some people you get in the church, you'll get really angry people who have a lot of pain and they're constantly lashing out at everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
when the emergent church ended, it wasn't because like a bunch of conservatives came along and were like, we can't stand this group. It was because a bunch of other progressives who didn't think we looked progressive enough and were thinking came along and said, no, you're not progressive enough. You're not that. And everybody's like, well, we don't want to be canceled. We don't want to lose our jobs. We're going to just stop doing this.
Yeah.
So that's another lesson to learn. It's like we kill our own. I mean, when I was growing up, it used to be that I remember my parents always said that the church was the only army that killed its wounded.
No,
Unfortunately,
wow.
yeah, and unfortunately now it seems like we're friendly fire is really tough, and so we're all got to give each other a little bit of grace, a lot of grace and some forgiveness and some errors and compassion. Even when the Bible, when Jesus was talking about like, okay, be ready to give an answer, but do it in a compassionate way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, be compassionate, be sensitive. It wasn't like, this is the way it is and this is how it is. And if you don't like it, then get the hell out of here. I mean, I had enough of that in high school. So I thought I was going to hell I thought I would just maybe have a deathbed conversion until about 21. And then around 21, I started to really understand grace and things. So I mean, 18, 19, 20, 20 I had started Revolution with friends like that. And I had to leave the church for a while because I was just like, there's something wrong with me, because I didn't grasp what grace was, that accepting that I was accepted by something greater than myself. And that did not require change. It just required me saying, okay, that's what it is. I am accepted.
Yeah. Like,
and that
I gotta at the very least, right?
Yeah.
At the first thought, like maybe it's possible that there is more to me than the worst thing I've done.
Yes.
Woof.
There's a quote from East of Eden that says, now that I don't have to be perfect, I can be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I realized with grace. And I was like, oh, this is and that's all I've been talking about since I was 21. I'll be 50 in December.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to share that with other people. And I want other people to help other people see that.
Yeah.
It is confusing to me to see how so many people are so angry with Jesus and like not with Jesus, but using Jesus as a weapon.
Yeah.
And using the Bible as a weapon. But I know I can give them some leeway because I know there are some things that they can use. But at the same time, I'm going like, but Jesus, if you really go back to Jesus, but for a lot of these folks, they don't think like Jesus can override anybody else in the Bible. They think the Bible kind of is all equal truth.
Yeah.
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 And I've always seen Jesus and love and grace as that kind of trump card within there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were not raised to recognize that and to see that. And so, it sucks because part of our job then becomes not just loving our enemy, but then it becomes like, well, we got to help educate them. We got to help them understand these things. We got to have these conversations. We got to send them in the right direction, give them good tool. I mean, I can remember I read this book called If Grace is True when I was in my early 20s, and I had all these little red flags written by all these different parts of it, and I went back years later and read this book, and it was laughable what I thought was red flags, like, oh, this is, be careful, this is a slippery slope
over here. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And then over time, but it became through studying and understanding and knowing scholarship. I mean, it started out with and it was because I grew up saying that there were no errors. The Bible was the most important thing ever. There's no errors. There's no this. You got to make it. If something's contradiction, you got to find it. And so I got all these. Originally went to the Christian bookstore and got all the, concordances and all the Greek and Hebrew books and study Bibles. And even then I started to preach things that weren't very popular. I think I started off with me saying holiness isn't what you can long for because holiness is a gift. It's nothing you can long for. And people got really mad at that. And started deep diving and then deeper diving. And then in my 30s, I started reading philosophy and I started reading Paul Tillich and John Caputo. And in my 40s, I started reading Hegel, and I'm actually reading a book on Lacan right now, which I never ever thought in my life. And I'm really literally reading this book on Lacan so I can read another book on Lacan. I had
you're doing your pre-homework.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like it's exhausting, man. It's really exhausting. But because there's an interesting view of Christ in there that I want to get to, but I have to be patient in order to get there.
Yeah, build the foundation to get to that point.
I was listening to these philosophers talk about Lacan and stuff, and they were talking about Christianity, and neither one of them are Christians, but they were being like, Christianity has been like turned into something that it wasn't ever meant to be.
Yeah.
You know, and it's turned into this really horrible judgmental thing, and that's not really Christianity. And here are these guys who aren't Christians, but they're both, philosophy professors speaking of this. And so I was like, yeah, I want to know more about where they're, where they're hearing that. I mean, I know that, but I want to know where they know why they see it so clearly through a philosopher.
Yeah.
So, there is good news, but like with you being in a community and things like that, I think in church and stuff, we got to check in with each other. We need, a little encouragement goes a long way. And I think if we're going to go out and we're going to speak the truth and we're going to have hard conversations, we need to have people in our life who are willing to support us and care about us and talk to us and be there for us, because it can get so lonely. You can feel so desperate, and you can internalize this stuff where you're having panic attacks and you're not sleeping well at night. I'm talking about myself. And you're going through all this.
I was going to say, I've been here. I know that.
Yeah.
How did you know?
So, I mean, this weekend, my buddy Brian from Houston came up, and he's a really good friend. And, and my friend Pete Rollins, who lives in Ireland, we talk and text each other a lot and things like that. You really need to have it's good to have a support system around, and it's good to have other things that help you. You can, like for me, today I work here in soon after school program at my kids' school, and I make sure all the kids get to their after school classes. I help the teachers if they have any issues like with kids and anything like that. I'll come in and help with that. I make sure all the kids get home. If they don't, I give them a ride home, make sure they get to the bus or do things like that. And I'm not a pastor there. I'm just I'm just dad,
Yeah.
And I'm just not, one of the kids that I'm also just Mr. J, who's
Mr.
helping.
J. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's vital too. And that's important because some of the things I remember most from when I was a kid that got me to this point in my life weren't Bible stories, weren't anything to do with Jesus, except maybe the guy, like I had security guards when I was a kid because my world was very different. And
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had not maybe the most normal,
no, it wasn't very normal, and being threatened to be kidnapped and stuff all the time and things like that. But like my security guard, Tommy, always made sure he gave me a hug at the end of the day, and there were certain people who saw me as a kid and showed me love and showed me my worthiness and showed me that I was worth their time. And that made me here today. That's why I might be using the Bible and Christianity and Jesus and those things. But it was also small things like that. It was like when I dropped out of high school and my math teacher said, you know what, if you never get your GED or anything, I really believe you're going to do something with your life. And I was failing math when I was dropping out.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's like small moments like that we often take for granted can really have a strong effect on people. And so it's easy to just over Jesus-y, over Christian these, and forget that we're human beings.
Yeah.
And if we're going to live this, we've got to live this on life's terms and be human about it. I once had a sponsor in the 12-step program who told me I was haphazardly human. And I've kind of worn that as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. I deal with a lot of depression. I deal with a lot of self-doubt. It's really tough at times. But I want to see a faith where people have faith in life, like faith in Christ, right? I'm not trying to win, but I'm also not trying to win anybody to Jesus. What I'm trying to do is help people love each other more and care about each other more. And that's what I get from the life of Christ. And that's what I subscribe to. Right. And it's not about where are we going to go when we die? I'm not to me, I'm we're here now.
Yeah.
And how are we going to help people find peace? How am I going to help somebody eat? Like
Yep.
it doesn't really right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is there's hungry people. How am I going to encourage people to stop supporting bombing? Or how am I
Yeah.
going to encourage people from putting their tribe first when this other tribe is completely being destroyed? How are we going to work to make change? Because I keep saying, like, I don't want to talk about politics in my last few talks because I don't really want to be the political guy. But I said,
Yeah.
but I have to remind everybody why I'm talking about politics is because it's about people. It's
Yep.
always about people and loving people, and people are worthy of being loved. And maybe Jesus takes that up a notch for us because he's just saying, like, yeah, you're going to love the ugly ones too, and you're going to love the angry ones too, and you're going to love the least of these, and you're going to try to love people as yourself.
Mm.
And that also reminds me, oh yeah, I got to love myself if I'm going to love other people as well. So
That's it, man. That's it. I feel like we do over spiritualize kind of everything. And ultimately, you look at what Jesus was all about, and it was even in the healing stories, even in these when he performs these miracles and heals people, it often ends with like, now go back to your community, like
yeah,
belong, right? Like ultimately, it's really like be connected to it. We are, I mean, if we think we're anything more than just little critters, social animals,
yeah,
we're lying to ourselves, man. Like we gotta belong to each other and figure out how to make sure that that person way over there who's so outside of my inner circle, how can they belong, right? Like
yeah,
how can they know that they're valuable? Know be reminded that they are good by virtue of being.
yeah.
Like they don't need to earn any of that. And I feel
And
like what
that's
you've described in that, like that's what church could be.
it would be great if it was, from I would, and I think it can be. But again, like I said, we see these folks who are preaching another gospel,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not even if you took the Christianity out of it, it's still bad stuff. It's still
Yeah.
like this, they're just putting which feels bad because it almost feels like they've like, you know, kidnapped Jesus or something.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's like but they still have this message of like, well, not everybody's equal and people are lazy and people don't deserve to eat just because they're alive. I mean, I don't know how many times a few years ago I was talking about, not even a few years ago, just not too long ago, but talking about like the importance that kids have free meals at school and are available to have food. And I mean, and having Christians reach out to me online and telling me like, no, they don't need, I don't want my taxes. Now, and these are the same people who don't care that their taxes are going to the biggest military in the world,
Right.
and then they don't want, the fact that like the government is put in, we have governments to take care of the people, to help the people, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And it's failing to do that, and then people say,
Yeah.
well, it's up to us as Christians to do that. We're not doing it. The church is dying. There's not enough of us to do that. There never was,
Right. No.
you know, and we
At
can't,
our very best, we are just filling the gaps
yeah. I mean, the fact that we
and
think
insufficiently.
that we're the ones who are the exclusive caretakers of the world when
Yeah.
we're can't even agree with other Christians and take care of each other and be kind to one another. It just, to me, it's mind-boggling how little we care about others or people who look different than us, or how willing we are to just you know sell folks short. So for me, it's like that's not Jesus at all, and
Yeah.
I hope people will see that. And I guess the real question is how do we get back to that? And I guess we just try to live it the best we can. We continue to
Yeah.
teach it. We invite people to conversations.
Yeah.
We are intentional about
Yeah.
our conversations, and when we're having them, there are certain people I'm intentionally harsh with and forward with, and there's other people I'm intentionally more gentle with. And okay, well,
Uh,
like I try to do my best and use my best judgment and my best discrimination, not my best discrimination, my best. I try to try to use
discern.
discernment. Yeah. See, I've been out of the church so long, I don't even know the
Yeah.
words anymore. I don't even know how to discern. My best discernment, and that's important to me.
We
So
can. I feel like we can worry about what happens after we die, when we get there. It's
yeah,
like everything we think we know about the afterlife. It's like the people who are talking don't know, and the people who know aren't talking anymore.
I mean, and I went,
So
and I've gone down these rabbit holes of, rabbit holes. I've gone down and looked into the context of hell, and it's not anything that I even buy into anymore, because it's
No.
just, most of it's Dante. You've got all these
Yeah.
traditions. You've got to translate 3 different words for things. You got to look at the 3 different words that Jesus is using, and one of them's not even from Christianity. You know what I mean? And you're going like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, well,
And now we're centering an entire theology on fan fiction when actually, like, this
yeah,
is what we've got. Can you believe we get to be living on Earth together at the same moment, and we get to do this all together? Like, what if that were the starting point,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, it's really wild. But I can see, though, why people, if they believe, if they have a theology of, God's going to put people in the ovens, but they'll never die, they'll just suffer for eternity, maybe why
Right.
they don't so much show love.
Right.
Like with the kind of predestination thing, I think, well, God created some people just to suffer for eternity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that concept, to me, if you think that's God, then maybe some of these folks are acting like the God that they serve, and so
Yeah.
I think that's the reason why theology is important and biblical scholarship's important,
Yeah.
to say,
And
hey,
community to wrestle with this stuff together, and
yeah,
free, like,
and not
listen
arrive
to
like,
each other. Yeah.
not
Exactly.
arrive at, go like, well, I'm a Lutheran, so I only believe this Lutheran theology. And I grew up I mean, in my 20s, I was like, I thought Lutherans had the corner on the truth. You know, I still like,
Lutherans believe that too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but then, you look at Calvinists and look how certain they are about their, the neo-Calvinist, and you
Yeah.
go like, okay, so I've had churches and denominations who've said, hey, you want to join up, and go, look, well, if I do, can I not subscribe to your theology? Because it
Mm-hmm.
might change. And they're always like, well, that's a bit of and I'm like, that's why I don't have a theology, because I'm like, well, what I believed when I was 25 and what I believed in 35 and then what I believed at 45
Yeah.
changed due to education and scholarship.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to,
And life circumstance.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing, is having open hands for that kind of stuff. And but it's
Yeah.
tough,
It's the that idea of, like, the opposite of faith not being doubt, but actually certainty.
yeah, doubt is an element of faith,
Yeah. It's like a
as Paul
cousin.
Tillich said.
Uh huh.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
certainty is bad, bad,
Yeah.
bad.
It's bad.
So that's yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm trying to solve all the world's problems right now while I'm talking to you, because I'm just tired. And I'm like, no, wait, we're gonna
We're
figure this
never.
out real
We're
quick.
yeah.
Hold on, and
That's
we'll announce it
tomorrow. We'll do it
tomorrow.
tomorrow. Yeah. Well, and I know you're gonna get going here to do church at the after school program
Yeah, yeah.
by giving hugs and being Mr. J the helper. But I mean, I'm really grateful for your time. I guess what I'm curious about, like, last thing would be, like, what's keeping you curious and holding your doubt and driving, lighting a fire under your rear end right now? Like, what's kind of keeping you
It's
going?
really grace. It's really the understanding of grace. I had a very similar. It wasn't a conversion, but like kind of a Martin Luther conversion to grace, of where I really did think God hated me and it was awful and all this stuff, and I had a kind of a dark night of the soul, and
Hmm.
understood grace, and it transformed me so much that there's a Paul Tillich gives this talk, and you can Google it. It's called "You Are Accepted" by Paul Tillich.
Okay.
Probably one of the best sermons ever given on grace. Period. We actually had Pete Rollins read it on our podcast, so we have a recording of it if
Ooh.
you want to hear. Because
Yeah, I'll put
Tillich
that
was
in,
never
like, the.
recorded, but you can hear Pete in his lovely Irish accent read it.
Oh, I love listening to him. Yeah.
Yeah, so that keeps me going. That's what keeps me with Christianity.
Yeah.
That's what keeps me in the faith, because otherwise I could just go be like, social justice warrior and just be like, yeah, I was
Yeah.
used to be a part of that group. But that I really do believe that we have something different, and that part of loving our enemies is so vital. I'm just really sad that what really makes me sad right now is that we're so bad at loving the least of these right now.
Yeah.
That we're so bad at loving people and children and kids who are suffering. Like, that just kills me. Like, how do I get
Mm-hmm.
somebody to love their enemy when we're not even focused on loving kids? And then when I see even people on the left who seem more focused about being included and putting the left, they're putting the right in their place, rather than these little kids, and rather than these families who are hungry, and rather than our immigrant brothers and sisters. It breaks my heart.
Yeah.
I mean, I was very heartened on the No Kings March, and it wasn't because it was like, oh, screw Donald Trump, but it was, because a lot of us were there is because we didn't like how our immigrant brothers and sisters are being treated. We don't like how Obama treated them, and we desperately don't like how the Trump administration is treating them, and we want this to stop because there's got to be a better way. We're not saying you have to open the borders, but there's got to be a better, humane, graceful way for those people. There's got to be a better way for people to make livable wages. There's got to be a better way for people, like living in the richest country in the world, for people to have medical care without worrying that they're going to go into bankruptcy, and that children should be able to go to school and have a meal. I shouldn't have to ask my daughter to pack extra food in my daughter's lunch bag so she can make sure that it's put in the shared thing, which we do. Right. But now this year, the schools decided to go completely free school lunch, which I'm really excited about. But those are the things we should care about. And it makes me sad that we don't care about those things. Instead, we either vilify those people, or we just get so concerned with scapegoating and vilifying that we've forgotten grace. We've forgotten forgiveness. We've forgotten the basic message of why Jesus on the cross said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And we're holding everybody accountable, saying, "Look, oh, they know, and
right.
And it's absurd, and it's profane, and it's antichrist. It really is. I mean, I think the book of Revelation is fan fiction, to be honest with you, 100%. I would tear it out of the Bible if I could. But that is the thing, is like, if we are called to love each other, we're called to show grace, we're called to show this mercy, and if there is any type of antichrist, is what I was going to say about Revelation. If there is that type of thing, it's a spirit. It's the way we as Christians act, so opposite of Jesus. And maybe we need to get a little bit louder. Maybe we need to get a little bit more DIY. Maybe we get a little more punk rock. Maybe we got to start thinking like, I used to just think, oh, I like to meet in bars because it's a cool place to meet and blah, blah, blah. But maybe those are things we need to do. And maybe we need to have online options for people who don't want to go anywhere on Sunday, and have these different options, and seeing those as relevant for the people who are part of that, and and we can coexist together and finding better ways that we can work together outside of our church tribe, outside of our own tribe. But how can we work together? Like, these type of things are important that we're talking, from Minnesota to Seattle and things like, how can we encourage each other? But I know, like, when I moved here, I tried to get jobs at other churches, and I couldn't get hired to clean toilets, man. So it's like, we're not even good at really being kind and gentle to each other.
Yeah.
And
or even to ourselves.
Especially to ourselves. So we've got to look at, like, what does that look like? And, even Jesus was like, had to go and take some time and get out on that boat. Yes, he was moved with compassion and came back, but he did need some time away from the crowds and things like that. So it's rich, but I think also, knowing that we don't have to just depend on the Bible. We've got great stuff. We've got great people who followed Christ and wrote some really beautiful things through history, and have taught us a lot of lessons that if we really understand, we don't have to learn on our own by failing on our faces, that we can go, King really got it here, or Tolstoy, or however you say his name, he got it here. And, and learning from those moments, even like, Malcolm X, when he went to Mecca, and this crazy change in his heart that he had, and for just unity through diversity. One of my favorite people is John Hume, who helped bring peace to Northern Ireland during the Troubles.
Yep.
And, his talk about, like, diversity is just the reality of life, and we have to find out difference is just a fact of life, and we've got to accept it and embrace it and love it. So those are people that I can go, oh, okay, there's Jesus, there's even Jesus, and they found a deeper way to communicate Jesus, so that's pretty cool too. So there you go.
Love that. Thanks for all of that. Thank you, Jay, and for your time. I really appreciate it. Where can people learn more about Revolution, more about you, what you're doing?
You can go to revolutionchurch.com. Okay. We have that. Or you can I'm Jay Baker on Instagram. That's where I hang out most.
Cool.
online. And I'm also on Facebook, and Revolution's on Facebook, Revolution's on Instagram, but really you can find me through revolutionchurch.com. All of our talks, we're on YouTube, they're on Spotify, they're on Apple Music. All that stuff is free every week. So
Great.
find us there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Really good to connect.
Yeah, man.
All right. See ya.
See ya.